Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Hi, welcome to our EduTrends podcast and webcasts brought to you by the Institute for the Future of Education. I'm José Pepe Escamilla, Associate Director of the Institute. And today we have a guest from the university, York University. Is the President and Vice-Chancellor of this university, Rhonda Lenton. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
It's a pleasure.
I hope that we have a dialogue around gender equality and all the initiatives that you're doing in the university. Why don't we start by that? Tell us what you're doing around gender equality in the university.
You know, my own work is in the area of gender equality, a great deal of it. But I would say that it's more accurate to describe what we're doing at York as a comprehensive approach to decolonization, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And, you know, when York was created just over 60 years ago, in its mission was specifically to advance social justice. It was always a lot of advocacy and had one of the very first women's studies programs anywhere, and certainly in Canada and beyond, which is now converted to gender studies. And so it's had a very long history, long established in advocacy for women. But of course, with the events that have taken place in recent years, the killing of George Floyd in the U.S. and a number of different issues, we've really broadened that to understanding the importance of having an overall strategy for equity. So I created a new division in the university called Equity, People, and Culture. And it's led by a vice president who is directly accountable to me, with the task of looking at all of our policies, our procedures, our representation, our curriculum, our research from that lens as we move forward. And it's been, she's been leading the process to develop an equity strategy. And every faculty, office, division, each now are developing an operational plan that is going to really help drive equity. And of course, representation is key. You know, making sure that you have good representation, looking for gaps, either with staff or students or faculty, addressing those gaps. We've been very successful over the last few years in addressing some of the gaps with the faculty and with the students. We're doing a climate survey that looks at sense of belonging to see if we have any work to do in that respect. We have 3 leading institutes that are very focused on EDI, including a gender organized research unit. So there's a tremendous amount that is happening.
Why do we need an initiative like that in a university, like York University?
You know, it's really everyone. It's very clear to everyone that the role of higher education in a global knowledge economy is only going to increase over time. And given the reliance on education, and in terms of even just thinking about the problems that we're facing, we do not want to leave any talent behind. We want to be sure that anyone who has the ability to study in university can do so, and that we're bringing together that diverse thinking. And if you look at the statistics, I'm not sure about all countries, but certainly for Canada, Canada has a very high percentage, for example, of in terms of diversity, women who are studying at university and college. But when you look at our engagement rate in diversity focused only on university and exclude the colleges, then Canada falls behind, several different OECD countries. And so there is work to be done in Canada in making sure that we're not leaving behind that talent. But also, if you look at some of the challenges that we're facing on a global scale, if you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, access to education, gender equity, these are issues that are still prominent around the world, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we're addressing gender equity and EDI in general globally.
It's a very important issue in all countries. I don't think it's only in Canada, but I was interested in hearing your answer for that. And it's very compelling in terms of gender, but we can also think in terms of ethnicity and or sexual orientation, disabilities, etc. And also this inclusion in the whole term, no?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's also when you think about those different voices and addressing EDI issues in the university system, that's also going to influence the kind of research that you undertake. I mean, historically, my work was in gender studies, and I remember when I first started doing work on some of the topics that I was doing, on sexual harassment, on violence against women and the family. You know, these were topics that people weren't looking at. If you think about how we understood labor, only paid labor mattered. I mean, you know, who is doing the research very much influences the questions that we're asking. And so you want to ensure that you've got a diverse collegium who are asking a very diverse set of questions from very different points of views.
Yes, that's right. So you say that you are implementing this in all of the areas of the university with these vice presidents that you created. And I was wondering how you do that. How do you approach the different areas of the university curriculum, faculty, staff, students? How do you do that?
Yeah. You know,
it sounds very complex.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, Tec de Monterrey, you have 26 campuses and you have 90,000 students. So you're much more complicated than we are. We only have 3 campuses, 2 global campuses. But, you know, I've been a very strong believer is you have to embed things in the infrastructure. If it has to rely on any particular president or dean, you know, things can crumble. And it starts with the strategic plan of the university. Equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's core in our strategic plan. And then after we have that plan, which is approved by Senate, so then you have broad buy-in, right? Senate has approved this plan. Then every single faculty, every division, every major office, they have to develop an operational plan. How are you going to actually contribute to their own plan? And actually, it's an implementation plan. You know, the strategic plan sets out really the priorities, but they have to talk about the implementation. And everyone gets assessed by this. And then students get involved. And we have linked this around I'll give you an example of a great course that helped us get students involved. It's called a C4 course. It's a capstone, upper level students, undergrad though. And they can identify a particular issue, mainly around the UN SDGs. And so many might take up the issue of gender equality or access to education or whatever, climate change, whatever the issue is. But then students from any discipline sign up for that course. So you end up with 25 students who are representative from all the different faculties across the university, and they work on that problem, and they come up with very specific suggestions. And it can be suggestions about what the university should do, or it can be broader suggestions around innovation and so forth. So, I mean, this is just one way to get the students very excited about making a difference.
Yeah, so it's in fact, what you're doing is a cultural change in the university, from the top to down, and making it something lasting. In this case, I will ask you also, how do you measure success from this plan that you have?
Well, we found that with all of our priorities, if you didn't operationalize that in terms of concrete objectives and actions, and then outcomes, expected outcomes with metrics that would be reportable and accountable to the entire community and to our board, you don't really know if you're being successful. And so our implementation plans talk very specifically about expected outcomes, goals around representation, or how we're pulling in, EDI into the curriculum, how we're pulling in the UN SDGs into the curriculum. So we have all of these metrics, and each one has to report back on those metrics. And then we roll those up to the whole community, so the community can see, have we improved representation of faculty, of students? Is there an improvement on a sense of belonging on the part of our students? How many courses now have an EDI perspective and where the curriculum has been revised? Decolonization is a very specific component of EDI because of the longstanding relationship that Indigenous peoples have had in Canada and the treatment of Indigenous peoples. And so that's also another whole piece. We have an Indigenous Council with expectations that we share with them. So it's really a very comprehensive report card that we produce annually where people can see our progress.
Can you talk a little bit about decolonization? I don't think that concept is generally known by the public.
Yeah. I think it's newer within the EDI landscape. So many universities still talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and they don't really focus, very much on the colonization issue of decolonization. But when we look at transgressions in Canadian history, it is transgressions against Indigenous peoples that really stands out. And treaties that were signed and broken treaties and understanding how embedded in so many of our organizations, there's this, really a very white supremacist, foundation that has shaped historically our policies, our procedures. And when we talk with our Indigenous partners, with whom we are working on a number of very important research questions around equity, they talk about the importance of acknowledging that history, and that if we're truly going to address those past transgressions, there needs to be an acknowledgement and a reconciliation. So we have a special Indigenous Council. I have a AVP of Indigeneity who works with the VP Equity, People and Culture. And just recently we did a very focused on contributing or investing some resources to encourage research on these issues called our Interdisciplinary Research Catalyst Initiative. And it was a very good response. And now we'll see what comes of that research over the next few years.
And so the initiative includes decolonization also as part of the, very interesting. So now that universities traditionally have been very focused on higher education, for degree, for credit education. And on my opinion, what they do in terms of continuing education is like a second-class endeavor in universities. And I believe that in our very near future, lifelong learning will be a very important component in society. And then universities have a very important role to play in lifelong learning. We talk about the 60-year curriculum, now that people, instead of going to the university for 4 years, the university becomes the partner of the student for the rest of their lives, changing from one job to another job, reinventing yourselves, going from one career to another career, and then at the end, maybe taking your retirement, but continue learning after that, no? So if we look at this perspective of lifelong learning in universities, how can we make this, also take this optic of inclusion, diversity, and I forgot the other letter.
Equity, diversity, and inclusion, yeah.
And equity.
It's such a great framing that you just gave to that question, because I've been in the area of working around, education, the future of education. And when I got first hired at my last university, at York University, where I am right now, I was hired to be the dean of the Atkinson Faculty of Liberal and Professional Studies. And that faculty delivered lifelong learning, basically. It was concentrated in one faculty. I had all the continuing studies, professional development programs. And it really shaped my thinking, because at the time, I thought, people are thinking about this. It's just an add-on, something that you might want to do, maybe a particular applied, skill set or something. And you are absolutely have defined it so correctly. We are on the cusp of thinking entirely differently about lifelong learning in the context of the universities. And all of these studies that have come out, and we're witnessing it right now, where 50 to 75% of all jobs are being impacted by automation and AI. All of that, those working professionals, the quality of their life, to some extent, is going to be strongly influenced by what higher education does to facilitate the transfer of the skill sets from so many of what sociologists refer to as the bad jobs and the rise of the good jobs. I mean, on a positive note, jobs that require, innovation, creativity, those are rising, those are increasing. And many of the jobs that are more routine, transactional, these are the ones that are being replaced. But if we're going to ensure a good quality of life for those working professionals who are being replaced, and in order to help them transfer into, new jobs, this is a very serious situation. And so the universities have got to embrace this notion that lifelong learning is not something that you just kind of tap on. Every single faculty department has got to be thinking about this whole approach to lifelong learning. But it also means a complete change in our infrastructure. A lot of people have said that the 120 we have in credits for our 4-year degree, it's 120 credits. People are saying this 4-year degree, it's passé. It's all about micro-credentials. Well, York is one of the leaders in micro-credentials. And we're very responsive to what the needs are. We work very closely with employers. I have a special stakeholder group with employers. I talk to them all the time about what the gaps are. We're working with companies. But this raises a point that we've been talking about at this conference, and that is really about how we're sharing this information about skill sets and shifting skills and how people can transfer from one occupation to another. We're all doing work on it. We all have such similar problems in higher ed. And frankly, what we're trying to do for society, we need to collaborate together and create platforms that share this information.
Thank you for your answer. Yes, we are here on the context of the International Conference of Education and Innovation, and that's why we are recording this in Monterrey campus of Tecnológico de Monterrey today. And we have been talking about the different or the opposition, if there is any, between degree education and non-degree education that is looking at credentials or micro-credential in people, and doing that shift between one or the other. There are some people that say that higher education will be less relevant in the future. Other people don't agree with that. What's your position on that?
I'm not really worried so much about higher education being relevant in the future. I do think we have to take seriously where we are right now and how we are supporting the evolution. If you look back, though, historically, this is not the first time that we've had transformative changes, disruptive, situations that are happening. And higher education has managed to evolve. So I believe it will be actually potentially even more relevant as we go forward. But it does require huge change in what we do. People standing at a lectern and lecturing to, 1,000 students or whatever. This is not what students want. Students can get their lectures very easily online, and they want to come and work together with other students, with faculty members. They want interactive learning, work integrated learning, experiential education. This is either both online and in person. So if we're going to stay useful and not risk our own institutional autonomy, because frankly, given the dependence that governments have, that the public has, we will get increasing pressure on us to behave in certain ways if we don't ourselves take that leadership role and make it very clear what the value proposition is of universities and how we are contributing to the serious global problems that we face.
We're connected with the needs of the society, the needs of in all context. I agree with what you said, and I will add also that I don't think those two kinds of ways of learning, something that is useful for your life and for your professional life, job, will be words completely separated. No, they particularly in Latin America, for degree education and not for degree education are like oil and water. No, they don't mix because of the regulations of the countries, and we need to do a more exchange between them so that you can obtain some credentials and then take them to the university, continue your studies, and the university also deliver not only degrees but micro credentials for you that are useful to find a job before you graduate, and do those kind of exchanges. And around the disappearance of universities, I also will agree with you, but we have to evolve universities. And I believe that the value proposition for universities that are more on the low quality are the ones that can be in danger because there can be offers that are shorter in time, less expensive for different publics to get what they want instead of going to the university, as long as employers recognize those micro-credentials.
Well, you just said something that's so important, because it's not just up to us. You employers could undermine the degree format of delivery just like that if they started saying, we don't care if it's a credit for your degree. All we want to know is that you can perform these certain kind, you've got these skill sets, and come and we'll hire you. And in fact, a little bit, if that is going on, because of serious gaps in talent, I don't know about other countries, but in Canada, employers are starting to say, you know what, I'll hire you after a couple of years of university. You come to us and we will give you the additional training. So we've created this degree called the Dev degree that we partner with a company that is really facing shortages, and they pay the student's tuition, and the student works 50% or more, up to 80% of their time in the company, and 20% on kind of crucial course, kind of content, working with other students. We are supporting all manner of students who have startup ideas. We're supporting small, medium enterprise. I mean, almost all of us now are into entrepreneurship programs. And so you already see this evolution happening, that it's not only about the 4-year degree, but there's also pushback and resistance. And then when you see companies like Google and Amazon and others, they're just setting up their own programs. So, I mean, if we don't want to make ourselves, more important and not have that value, we need to add that, to be agile and add the flexibility and have a whole range of different types of, modules and degrees. I've told all of my programs that are offered non-credit that you need to go to Senate and you need to, with a proposal that says that if the student decides that they want to go from this non-credit program into a full degree, they're going to get all recognition for that. It's ridiculous that they can't get recognition because in many cases, it's the same materials and skill sets. So there's ways to start bridging the non-credit and the credit side now, but we're going down this path. I'm convinced we're going to go down this path even much more in the future.
That's right. We also have experimented with micro-credentials in Tec de Monterrey, and on the beginning of the last year, 2022, we launched a new normative for the university where we recognize micro and macro credentials as credentials that can be part of the curriculum of the undergraduate and the graduate degree, but also from our continuing education vice presidents, which is like the lifelong learning part of the university. They also develop programs that, when they develop those programs, have micro and macro credentials, and some of them are developed so that they can get credit into the program of the undergraduate degree or the graduate degree.
Yeah.
And I don't know, in other countries, maybe that sounds like something relatively easy, but in a Latin American country like Mexico, it's very hard. And it's really breaking something, a paradigm between those two words that I told you are like water and oil.
Yeah. And there's practical problems too, though, Jose, because what we found with a lot of our credit programs is that they were very worried that the flexibility of the non-credit, because it's often offered on weekends or online or in the evenings or whatever it might be, might draw their students. This concept of, well, these are my students, and maybe you're drawing them away now into this non-credit version of what, we would do, especially in business, human resource management, ITech. We found just huge anxieties about how this would undermine, the degree. And I've said, look, it's not about undermining the degree. It's thinking about modules of learning along a huge, continuum, and students building blocks, and students who have to accommodate students who want to build these blocks. We can figure out the financial piece of it. We shouldn't be viewing within one university, oh, well, this money is going to go to the continuing studies department. As if you're all engaged in your continuing studies, then, you're part of that whole continuum. So the divide between the professional continuing studies and, 4 credit degree programs, I think that's almost in every single country that approach was taken. So it's not going to be easy to break down those barriers, but I do see them starting to crumble.
Yes, and then there's also what you learn without being in front of a professor. Not so many people think that it's not valid if you didn't learn that in front of the professor, so you can transfer what you have learned on the job to a micro-credential or to a degree. This is another form, I believe, of equity, diversity, and inclusion. What else can we do in lifelong learning to improve the EDI?
Do you have a split in Mexico between colleges and universities?
We do, but they are part of the higher education system. And the law says that students that do a 2-year degree, they should have access to transfer their credits towards a university degree. Most of the time, universities doesn't comply with that completely. So some of those colleges are offering additional studies so that people finish like undergraduate degree, not only a associate professional or something.
Because this is exactly the issue we're facing in Ontario. It's not true for all of Canada, but in Ontario, the college and the university system were created very differently for different purposes. College was really applied trades, and university, with the kind of sort of the notion of transferable skills and, breadth and research. And we realized that the colleges often were transferring, students were transferring to us. And when they were transferring to us, we did accept, let's say they had a 2-year diploma, so we gave them credit. We then discovered that the college had given that student prior to learning assessment credits for demonstrating maybe they had done a certain kind of work and they already had a skill set, and so they were given credit. Universities always said, no, we can't possibly give credit for prior learning. But then what I said to some of my colleagues, I said, you accepted that 2-year diploma, and that college gave that student 60 credits or 40 credits or 30, whatever it was. I said, so you are accepting prior learning. And so I was trying to break this down for colleagues, because this is, I think, a shortcoming of universities, that we do not give really almost any credit for prior learning assessment. And so someone can go and sit and write and pass an exam. They can demonstrate a skill set, and we're still saying, no, you have to put in your 120 hours in this course. It's ridiculous. So I do believe that universities in Canada, certainly in Ontario, it's better in Western Canada, we are going to start increasingly giving a certain amount of credit for prior learning.
It's going to be a big change.
It's a huge change. We're already in the change, because you imagine that the whole system in Canada initially started with the lens of the faculty member. What the faculty thought, the student should have. So it was degree level expectations. If you have this degree, this is what I am going to teach you. And then actually with influence from Ireland and other countries who started talking about student learning outcomes, it got flipped. Well, wait a minute. What is this? What knowledge and what skills will the student have when they finish this degree? Not what you're going to teach them in the class. I don't care about your curriculum so much. I care about what the student will learn and be able to demonstrate. That was a very good switch, that switch to that from the student lens, because it allowed us to raise the whole issue of prior learning. Well, you told me that the student has to be able to do ABC.
No matter
the
how
student
they
can
learn
do ABC. So why wouldn't you give them the credit for the course? So this whole, a whole new lens of how we look at education and learning, it was incredibly important to raise some of the questions that we've been chatting about.
Thank you very much, Rhonda, for sharing with us your work in your university around equity, diversity, and inclusion, including decolonization for sure, and talking about the future of education. I really enjoy this talk, and I believe that our audience will also love to hear it.
Thank you so much. I love talking with you, and partnership, as you know, is so important, and I really am looking forward to continuing to work with Tec de Monterrey.
We'll sure do. Thanks a lot. For more information, visit observatory.tec.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tec.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tec Sounds team. Tec Sounds producer, Miguel Mejia. EduTrends producers, Esteban Venegas and Christian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.